everybody. Today I wanted to talk to you about how to communicate exactly what you want to the illustrator that you've chosen to work with on your indie book project. I think it's really hard to explain to somebody an image or a concept, and so I thought it would be useful to talk about the kind of information that you can give to an illustrator to make sure that they can produce exactly what you have in your mind for whether it's a children's book or whether it's an illustrated adults book, whatever it is you commissioned for them to do. Just how you can make sure that you get exactly what you'd hoped for. Now, last week I made a video about how to find an illustrator, and I will link that below in case that's useful if you haven't done that stage yet. But what I said in that video about making sure that you've done your research is still really important for this one. If you've already found an illustrator, you should have already figured out certain things about your book. So how, what the trim size is, so you know how big it is, whether it's portrait, landscape. You should know how it's going to be laid out in terms of how many page spreads it's going to be, so how many illustrations are going to be needed, and also how big those are going to be. So are you asking for single pages? Are you asking for a double page thing? Do you want little spot illustrations? Exactly what it is that you want, because you'll have needed to communicate that in order to get a quote. You should also have an idea of the kind of art style you're looking for, again, so that you could find somebody who can produce that style for your book. So once you've actually found an illustrator, you may still need to refine your ideas some more. So if you need to do some more research, make sure you take the time to do that. The more information you have, the better. So spend some time looking at children's books, have a look at how they're laid out, the kind of ideas, what you like, what you don't like, anything that inspires you when you're thinking about your own project. You might also like to look at general artwork or illustrations. Pinterest is a great tool for this, but however you like, whether you go to libraries or you've got resources in your own home, or however you want to try and access these creative ideas, but make sure you look at lots of illustration and artwork so you know what you like, what you don't like, how things are composed. It can also be very useful to look at books in a similar genre, so you know what's been done before, so you know if there's like a typical style that's used in that particular kind of book, so that you have an idea whether you want to follow those or move away from those. So it's really, really helpful to have a very good idea of exactly what you like, exactly what you don't like, and what you have envisioned for this book. Another thing to make sure that you know is how the story is laid out. So separate out your story into what information is on each page, and then make sure you know for that page what's going to appear in the picture. So what characters are there, what's the setting. It's okay if you don't know how to represent something because you don't have the artistic skill yourself, and that's why you're asking an illustrator to do it. But even if you say to your illustrator, oh, it needs to convey this, but I don't know how to do that, that's still really helpful. So the more you know about what each page is meant to try to say, like I said, who needs to be on it, what the setting is, and if there's anything specific that you want them to include. So make sure that you've planned that out as best as you can. Now, the way I went around this was to draw little double page spreads. I'll see if I can find my one for the book I'm working on at the moment, but I just drew like tiny sketchy double page spreads with stick men, you know, of what would be on that page, what would be represented, how it could be laid out across the book. And you can send those sketchy ideas to an illustrator, but I think it's really important that you have spent that time planning out how the story kind of flows across the pages, and like I said, what are the images that you expect to go alongside that. The thing is, the more that you know about your book, the more likely it is that the illustrations are going to be right, because if you ask the illustrator to just work blind, you know, you give them the text and that's all they've got, their vision may not be the same as yours. And illustrators are generally willing to try and to follow the ideas that you have as best as they can. They may suggest, I'm not sure that will work, how about if we do it like this? But the more that you can tell them, the more likely it is that they're going to be able to achieve what you had in your mind. And that's really hard to communicate. So I've done this in a few different ways. Once you know what you want, one way that I've done it is to draw up like a PDF. It doesn't have to be a PDF, but a document with the text split into pages, and then I just annotate it. So right next to it, this is going to have this character, that background. You need to know this information, this would be useful, anything like that, anything that's pertaining to that particular section, I'll include on this. And I feel like then it's in one document and you've got the text and the notes side by side. Another way that I've done that is to just write it down in an email and just say, spread 1, and then some bullet point notes. It has this person and this is important and all of the little bits and pieces that they need to know. But I do think it's helpful, like I said, if it's got the text next to it. But as long as you have kind of written down each section and this is what I have in mind and these are the important things. So you can do that and write it as text. Another thing to say is include anything weirdly specific. So for example, in my book Lily the Limpet Gets Lost, the creatures needed to be British sea life. You can identify the fish in that book if you so wanted. It was important that that was right. So I sent links to information about fish typically found in rock pools, or this creature is specifically this kind of creature, or you would find this kind of habitat. You know, if you've got things that are very specific like that, then you can share all those links and that information. Equally, it might be that you want your cat to be in this book as a background character, but it's just a little thing that you want to include. So you need to tell them, this is going to have my cat in it. Here's a picture of my cat. It's important, you know, anything that you want that's specific, little details that need to be included. Now, another thing that you do need to communicate is any details about the characters. So, you know, this goes back to your research, but you should know at least some information about these characters, what they look like, what their character is, so the illustrator can convey that. So, you know, let the illustrator know how old they are, how, you know, what they look like. Is there any little details like this character always wears a hat, or this character always has their hair up, or in my current book, the main character wears a green dress. That's important for reasons that I will talk about in the future. But things that you know about them that are important. If you've included things in the text, like if the fact they wear a green dress is in the text, make sure you also mention it in your notes to just make it very clear. This character, they look like this, they wear this, they may have this expression on their face, they have this character, whatever you can tell them about those characters. So at this point, all of that information is written in text form on some kind of document. But there's other ways of trying to convey that information. And one of the best ways is using Pinterest. I will try to link my Pinterest board below for the current book to give you an idea of the kind of thing that I would put together, or I did put together for an illustrator. So on Pinterest, I would pin a whole range of stuff for them. So the kind of things I look at are styles, colour, anything that relates to a particular page. So these are cats, similar to the cat that I want on there, or this looks a bit like how I think that the character looks, something along these lines, or this is, I like the composition of this, or I like, you know, anything. You can look up any artistic ideas, things that have inspired you, or make you think of exactly what it is you're trying to convey. And it doesn't just have to be from children's books or from illustration. You can share things from, it could be a photograph of somebody that your character is supposed to look like, or it can be a piece of information on there about how a certain thing is done, or a particular species, or anything pertaining to your book at all. It can be really varied, but on Pinterest you can write notes as well. So in the comments you can say, oh, I really like the colours in this picture, I'm looking at something like that, or oh, I don't like the art style of this, but the composition is nice, or this is the kind of thing I had in mind for page 4, or whatever it might be. And if you have all of that on your board, you can just send that across, and they've got all of that information that is so hard to say in words, but really much easier to say in images. To say, it's like if you put these images together and smush them together, that's what I'm looking for, and an illustrator should be able to interpret that for you. So Pinterest is a really great tool. Of course, if you don't want to use Pinterest for whatever reason, you can simply do an image search and drop the images into a document with descriptions. I've done that too. On that notes page I was talking about, I've also dropped images in. Something like this. Now, so alongside all of that, so we've got a text description, we've got some pictures. Another thing you can do is share your own illustrations. Now, you may not, like I have, attempted to illustrate your own books, but if you have tried to sketch things out, do share that with your illustrator. Don't be embarrassed to, you know, oh, my art's not very good. I have seen on some of the Facebook groups I'm on, people saying, oh, I sent my illustrator this stick figure thing of, oh, I want like this character with like holding an umbrella, and they've got like a shop next to them, and there's like a cat jump. Why are there so many cats in my stories? There's not normally a cat jumping down onto their umbrella, and this is the kind of composition I'm looking for, and they've drawn like a stick figure thing, and then they say, and this is what the illustrator did, and it's just this amazing professional version. An illustrator will not laugh at you because your own sketches are rubbish. They'll appreciate the fact that you're giving them a guideline to what you have in your mind, and they'll turn that into something artistic. So if you can sketch bits out, and again, this is where you could share that storyboard that you created at the beginning. You could say, this is the kind of thing with the stick figures, and I mean, if you can draw well, then draw well, but it doesn't have to be good. But don't be embarrassed to share with them your own little drawings, and say, this is the sort of thing that I wanted, or your own attempts, and say, I want this but better. It's fine to do that. So do share your own sketches, your own notes, as much information as you possibly can, photographs of things. If it's meant to be a picture of a particular place or a particular animal, and you've got a photograph they can work from, then send that to them. Now, the more that you can put together into like one document that they can then use as a resource, or one email, so maybe on that email you've got your document attached with your notes, and then maybe you've got some links to like your Pinterest board, some useful information on some websites, you know, a whole list of things. So that's their resource when they're trying to find stuff out. That's a really good way of doing it. But you can, if you think of something later, you can still share that with them and send it to them. The more communication that you have with your illustrator, the better. And the better that kind of, that channel between you is, and the better you vibe, the better your book's going to be, and the more it's going to meet your expectations. The more information I've given to people, the better not the better the outcome is, because the illustrations have still been amazing, but the closer it is to what I wanted. And then that means that you don't have to do lots of redrawings, or lots of discussions about, oh no, not like that, and giving them even more information. If you can just give them everything up front, then that's just going to make for a better experience right from the beginning. Now, I know it's not rocket science to say, oh, write down what you want and share some pictures, but I think it's really helpful to say these are the kind of things that an illustrator needs to know. They need to know what your characters look like, and they need to know where the book is set, and they need to know if there are particular objects that are important in a scene, or that a particular character or setting has a certain characteristic about it. They need to know that, and if you don't tell them, they're not going to produce it in their illustration. So trying to convey that using a mixture of words, which as the author, hopefully that's not too difficult for you, and images to say, you know, like this style, like this composition, like this colour palette, to try and supplement the words that you've used, whether you do that by putting it all in one big document or whether you link to other resources. You just need to try and give them as much information creatively so that they can then run with it. And as I said earlier, it's okay if there are gaps in that. The illustrator will fill in the details that you haven't given them, but if there was something important in there that you didn't share with them, then they're not going to get it right. It's okay to say to the illustrator, it needs to have these characters doing this, but I don't know how that goes together to look artistic. That's their job, that's fine. But as much information as you can give on all the important points will really help them to do the best possible job that you're going to be really happy with. So I hope you found that useful. Now, I know there are illustrators who subscribe to this channel, so illustrators, if you're watching this, please do leave in the comments any tips that, from your perspective, help to kind of communicate those creative ideas and get the best possible experience for both of you. If you've got any tips on how that's worked really well for you, then I would love you to comment that below. And the same, any other indie authors out there, do leave in the comments anything that you have found useful when you're trying to communicate your ideas to an illustrator. I don't think that it's necessarily an easy thing to do. So yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think. It's always helpful, and the comments are a really good resource too. Please hit like if you found this video useful and subscribe for more videos like this one. Take care.